So thank you so much for being here today at the official premiere of Screening of Clouds. My name is Olivia Nardell, and I'm a senior from High School 1327 who works closely with the Tam Union High School District's Wellness Center. I'm very excited to be here to introduce this movie and the film's wonderful director, Justin Baldoni. This premiere screening kicks off the third season of the Teen Wellness Film Series presented by CFI Education in partnership with the Tam Union High School District's Wellness Center. So for this reason, I would like to give a huge thank you to Disney Plus for allowing us to premiere this wonderful film at the Mill Valley Film Festival and for allowing us to incorporate it into our series. So thank you, Justin, so much for taking the time to be here today. It's really like a huge pleasure of mine.
Thank you for having me, Olivia.
Of course.
Wow, you're such a good speaker.
Thank you.
Well done. That's not easy. Normally when I do those, I mess up like 5 or 6 times, and you just did it perfectly the first time. So bravo.
Thank you. So I'll get started. My first question is just how long you've known about Zach Sobiech and his story, and like how did you even find out about him?
Well, this all started for me when it was about 8 years ago. I started making a documentary series called My Last Days. With my good friends who started this company called Soul Pancake. And My Last Days was an exploration of life told by people who had recently found out that they were dying. And it was a small documentary series, and I had spent about a year making the first season. We had made 6, and I really wanted to make 7. And I was looking for something unique. I was looking for something with music, and I just had this feeling that there was somebody else out there. But I didn't know. I was constantly searching the internet and searching for stories, and we found some incredible stories. And it was when I stopped searching that I actually found Zach. I was in Milan, Italy. I had gotten the flu on the flight, so I had landed with a fever. I was miserable. And I was with my then girlfriend, Emily, now wife. And it was just it was like one of these days and weeks where like everything kind of feels like it's going wrong. And I was kind of feeling sorry for myself. And I was like, oh, well, me, my house had gone into foreclosure. I'd lost kind of everything, but I was happier than I'd ever been, really, because I was making the show. But this week was just like, you know what? I can't be happy. I'm just depressed. I'm sad. And I was sick, and I was like, it was beautiful in Italy, and they were all enjoying pizza and pasta, and I was stuck at home on the couch. And I looked at my computer browser. I'd never done this. And I clicked on the news tab, it was like a USA Today news tab. And the first thing that popped up was dying teen writes farewell song. And it was Zach. And it was when his song had just started getting picked up. Nobody really knew his story yet. He was just starting to do interviews, and no one had really even heard the song. It didn't even have 1 million views. It was brand new. And I just knew, I got the chills. I listened to 30 seconds, 20 seconds of the song. And I immediately started figuring out how to contact Zach, how to find a way to get in touch with Laura. And then that led to me making the documentary, becoming super close with the family, having Zach become a little brother, even though we didn't spend that much time together. And me making a promise to him before he passed away that I would do whatever I possibly could, whatever was in my power, to make sure that I helped his story get out into the world, and that people donated to osteosarcoma research into his fund, and that his music would be heard. That was my promise to Zach. And after he passed away, his song hit #1 on iTunes the day of his funeral. And the family and I started talking about ways to further the message. And his mom wrote a book the following year, Fly a Little Higher. And I optioned the book to turn it into a movie. And took 5 years, but here we are. And
Wow.
Sorry for the long-winded explanation, but there's a lot of little pieces that went into that.
No, that's great. You're very fortunate to have obviously met him during his real life. That's awesome. That's great. So my next question is kind of what was the writing process like? And especially for Cloud specifically, if you had started writing it after his passing, what was that like, trying to connect with him?
Well, so his mom wrote the book, and the book was really a collection of I remember Laura had really reached out to everybody in her network to ask for stories about Zach. And so it was Laura's book, but also it was like a collection of memories and a retelling of the experience from a lot of different people's perspectives, so that like she could make sure it was accurate. And in that we tried to figure out how to take the book, take Zach's life, and craft a Hollywood movie that wasn't 4.5 hours long, that didn't chronicle like him finding out he had cancer when he was 14. And then, it was like, how do you condense everything to a period of 8 or 9 months? And my idea was, let's start with him having cancer. Everybody finds, we've all watched the movies where you like find out somebody's got cancer, right? Yeah. But this movie wasn't about cancer. It also wasn't about dying, right? If you took out the fact that Zach was dying from the movie, you'd still have an incredible story. I mean, he was your age, Olivia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Zach was your age. He was a senior in high school when he found out that he didn't have that much time. And he did all of that his senior year. And I'm like, well, that's an incredible story. Imagine just finding out, or aspiring to be a singer and then becoming, one of the first people to hit #1 without a record label in 1 year, about that.
Yeah.
But if you add and compound the fact that he's doing it because he's running out of time, and then how it brought the family together, and you bring in the love story and how these young kids made positive choices. There was no like, catty, mean girl situation where like one person was fighting over the other. You had Sammy, who was secretly in love with her best friend and was a writing partner. And then you had Amy, who was his girlfriend, and they were friends, and they all wanted what was best for each other. That's the best of humanity. That's the best of high school, right? It's the best of showing what can happen when you're 17, 18 years old and you're faced with obstacles and hard situations. So we just wanted to figure out, how do we take it all together and craft this emotional but true story? So Kara Holden was our writer and did an impeccable job of channeling Zach, talking to him. I'll give you one fun story is, I remember she was sitting there and, we didn't really want to have voiceover in the movie originally, because it's a trope that, a lot of movies kind of fall back on. But I remember she told me she was sitting, I don't know if she was in her car or maybe I was in my car when she told me, but she was talking to Zach. She's like, Zach, who do you want to tell your story? Like, what's our POV? And I remember she told me she heard Zach's voice. She just felt him. And he goes, me, dummy. And that gave her the idea from Laura's book of this essay that Zach had tried to write, this college essay, and wasn't able to write it. So she called me and she said, I feel like Zach just told me he needs to tell his story, and it should be written and framed around this college essay that maybe he wrote. And I said, Kara, he did write it. And she goes, what? It's like, Kara, he did write it. So we were able to use some of what he actually wrote in real life and put it in the movie, combined, of course, with things that he actually said. And that became our frame. That became our frame of reference. And then the rest of it takes place over 9 months over the course of his senior year. It's an incredible story. It's a true story.
That's awesome. That's actually really cool that you were able to use like his college essay, something that has a lot of weight on it to tell your story and turn that into a movie. That's awesome. So obviously the story is about young people, and you had a very young cast, Finn Argus playing Zach, and then Madison Iseman playing Amy Amadale, and Sammy Brown is Sabrina Carpenter. And so my question is, kind of what are some of the best parts or even some of the challenges about working with a young cast?
The hardest part about working with a young cast is keeping their attention.
Yeah.
But it's also the best part. So, this whole experience, I wanted to create, I didn't want to make just a regular movie. This wasn't a regular movie to me. This was about a real person and real people that are not much older than you are now. Again, this was 7 years ago. So they're 24, 25 years old, these kids. And they all have jobs and they have their careers starting. And this is a part of their history and their life. And, Finn and Zach and Sabrina and Madison, they could touch the real people. And so I said, well, we need to have them be as much of a part of this as anybody else. So my goal was to create an experience for the kids and for the real people, for the real family members and friends. And the way you do that is you bring them all together and you let them become friends. So then they can, instead of only leaning on me as their director, they can also Sabrina can lean on Sammy and be like, hey, how would you have said this? Right? Or Madison can talk to Amy, and Amy can tell her about this private conversation that her and Zach had to, help jumpstart her emotional life. And then it's my job to guide that. I took Finn and Madison to Minnesota to meet Zach's family beforehand. And I let Zach go in Finn go in Zach's room. And they all played music together, and amazing things came from that and were born from that. Neve Campbell went and met with Laura. Tom Everett Scott, who played Rob, and met with Rob. Everybody spent time with everybody. And that really informed how this was all going to happen. So these kids had a very, very deep understanding of what this meant and who these people were, and the heart connection and the emotional connection, and how much they loved Zach and what Zach meant to them. So they were so professional. The best part about them being kids was also the worst part, which was their attention span and their goofiness. Sometimes I would have to redirect their energy, was also the thing that kept it light. So it was a beautiful thing that they were so young, because they were fun and they took it seriously, yet they didn't take it too seriously that it became like their whole world. It was a fun environment. And, I really try to approach making movies with young people, even though I'm not that young anymore, as a young person. We become friends, we talk, we create a safe space for them to explore and try risky, vulnerable things. And at the end of the day, you got to keep it light, because otherwise we're not taking Zach's words to heart. We have to enjoy making the movie. If we don't enjoy making the movie, what are we doing? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And how did the kids feel about kind of recreating some of those more, upsetting and very personal parts of Zach's life? How do they feel about that?
I think they really took it on as a bounty, I think they're also honored they got a chance to do that. I mean, it's very rare at 21 years old, you get to play a real person from 7 years ago who did something so miraculous as Zach did, or who made such positive choices, and chose to be in love with someone despite their, oncoming death, as Amy did, or who wrote such profound music at 17 as Sammy did. Right. So I think that they just had so much respect for the story and the real people that they just took it on, and they shouldered that burden, and they knocked it out of the park. And I'm so proud of all of them.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. And this is the second movie you've directed. The last one was 5 Feet Apart, about more specifically young people with health issues. Is there a reason for that, or is there a reason why you chose this one?
Well, I've spent the last 7 years making documentaries about real people who are dying and who have chronic health issues. And I've learned so much from those people. The first movie was inspired by my friend Claire Wineland, who passed away, who had cystic fibrosis. And it was born out of a conversation Claire and I were having about how 2 people with CF can't touch. And I thought to myself at the time, 3 years ago, wow, how powerful would it be to make a movie where people can't touch and yet they can still have love? Not realizing in 2020 that would be the norm, right?
Yeah.
But it's not so much about young people with chronic illnesses or sick kid movies. For me, it's about showing young people to, seize the moment, to hasten the day, to realize that you are young and it's a gift. And you have the power and the choice to do incredible things with your youthfulness. And that bad things are going to happen in life. You're going to get tested. Hardships are going to come. But showing that how these young people make choices, to me, is what's inspiring. And that's why I've made those last 2 movies. And that's why the center of them have been health conditions. But at the same time, neither one of those movies is about the condition. 5 Feet Apart was about love. And it was about this idea that you don't need sex. You don't necessarily need touch to explore and to feel and to be in love, especially for young people today. And that in many ways, the love and the connection grows stronger. So it was an exploration of love. It wasn't about the sickness. In fact, it was the opposite. It was showing how we can overcome obstacles in the pursuit of love. And this movie is not about cancer and it's not about death. It's about what we choose to do with our life while we're here. All of us are going to die. Every single one of us. It seems super far away when you're 18, but it's going to happen to us. It's the one thing we know. So what it comes down to is, what are the choices we're going to make in our lives that we're going to be proud of? What are the things that we're going to do with our time while we're here, while we're able to? And at the end of our lives, one day, we're going to look back and we're going to have to ask ourselves how we spent our time. And the desire and the goal and the dream is that we can be proud of how we spent our time and not have regrets. And fundamentally, that is what this movie is about. And that's also what 5 Feet Apart was about.
Awesome. Yeah. I think you've touched on this a lot, and you just did, but young people dealing with struggles is like a real thing. And obviously, these two movies that you've directed are kind of more just a way of showing that, and how people overcome really difficult hardships, such as sicknesses. But also in this movie specifically, I really noticed and appreciated how much you showed, not only how Zach overcame his hardships, but how the people around him, especially the young people around him, were able to support him while still also grieving. And like you said, why do you think that's just so important for young people to understand? I've heard so many stories of how, and from people who are sick, from friends who've passed away, from people like Claire and Zach, and others, how when they found out they were sick or when they found out they were dying, kids around them that were their age didn't know how to handle it or what to do when they disappeared. And there's nothing that's more painful than being 17 or 18 or 14 or 12 and finding out you might have less time left than all your friends, and then also losing your friends. Yeah. And it's not anyone's fault. It's because society hasn't prepared us for those conversations. It's because we don't know how to hold space for the uncomfortable conversations and the things that challenge us. We don't have the vocabulary at that age to be able to know what to say to somebody when they find out they have cancer or they have to go to chemo or they're dying. These are not things that are talked about because it's taboo. I want young people to know that they don't have to run away from somebody when they find out they're sick or when a hardship happens. In fact, they should run towards, because both the person who's experiencing the trauma or the chronic illness and the friend can grow through that. And that's what happened in Zach's real life with Amy and Sammy. That's where so much of the healing happens. The fact that Amy made a choice to fall in love, knowing 9, 10, 11 months later, he wasn't going to be physically here anymore, is one of the bravest things you can do. But she did it because she was willing to live in the moment. And she was willing to sacrifice her future pain for her present love. And in that, she gave Zach the greatest gift of all. Zach got to be in love, deep, real, hardcore love, something that most people in this world never get a chance to truly feel. He got to experience that before he died. And Amy gave him that gift. And in return, Amy got a lot. Amy got to learn how to live while you're dying. Amy got life lessons you don't get till you're in your 80s or 60s. And there's so much richness for young people. And so my hope is that people can watch these movies and realize that there are so many people in their lives that are struggling that they don't ever know are struggling. And the things that we take for granted, as Zach says in the movie, the ability to walk without a limp, the ability to study for a test, to show up to class, is a privilege that many people are realizing existed
like before 2020, right? We didn't realize how much of a privilege it was to be able to go to a classroom and learn from a teacher. Now in 2020, with Zoom classes, you miss it. God, I miss my friends. God, I miss being able to hug people. God, I miss being able to, like, you know, talk to my teacher or whatever it is. These things are privileges. So what so many of us take for granted, others are fighting for. And that's at the core of what this is all about. That's what young people, I pray, take away from this. Don't run away from the pain, run towards the pain. On the other side of it is bliss.
Awesome. And you talked about Laura's book earlier, Fly a Little Higher. Which part specifically did you think was the most important to include in the movie?
There's a few parts that are really important. I'll give you a couple of them from the book. One of the most emotional parts for me that I had to get right for the movie was the Grace-Zach relationship. So I'm really proud of how that turned out, because Grace and Zach, like many siblings that are a few years apart, they expressed their love with like teasing and like banter and making fun of each other. And they didn't say, I love you. That wasn't how they expressed their love. Zach loved her so deeply and she loved Zach so deeply, but it was expressed with, like, you know, her giving him shit and making fun of him. Right. And Zach stealing the remote. And that final scene with Grace and Zach, where they're sitting on the couch, is textbook actually what actually happened. And that was important to me. They didn't know how much time he had left, and he mustered all the energy he had, and he sat up and he gave her the remote and said, watch whatever you want. And, like, I mean, it just destroys you when you read the book and when you watch the movie, because you don't have to have a whole sappy, like, brother-sister love scene. That's how they expressed it. The other thing that was important, there's so much. I mean, the conversation that Laura had with Zach about we did it on the footsteps of the house and the snow, but the conversation around the choice Zach had when he, you know, after he came home from school and, you know, everyone's talking about going to college or they're writing a senior paper or a college admission essay. And Laura had to figure out, what the heck do I say to my son right now? And so that monologue is very much taken from the book, almost exactly. And Neve Campbell just did a beautiful job of holding the space and the pain for what she was experiencing with the loss of a son, but yet also finding the strength to show up as a mom for her son. It's so beautiful. And then also the advanced directive scene, just exactly like what happened in real life. I wanted to capture what it was like for mom to go through this checklist of what Zach wants to do before he dies, or how he wants to go, or, you know, how he wants to be buried, or organ donations and all these things, and what he wants his funeral to be like. And you can't write it. It doesn't get better than that. That's what Zach said. You know, she said, how do you want to die? He said, skydiving in Florida, you know, and then he said what he said about, you know, the readings he wanted at his funeral, and that he wanted bagpipes, and they played bagpipes at his funeral and everybody laughed because that was Zach. Some things you don't have to rewrite. God writes them, life writes them, and then it's our job to recreate them and try to capture that same magic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know you worked really closely with the Sobiech family, obviously before and probably definitely throughout the movie. But what was the biggest message that you learned from them, like the actual family and Zach?
Man, it was a lot of pressure because I love them all so much. They're my family. And I didn't want to mess up. You know, it wasn't just a Hollywood movie for me. It was a gift to the family, and I didn't want to screw it up. So what I learned the most, I learned a couple things. One is I learned that they're some of the most amazing people you could ever meet. And as Laura said, this was bigger than all of us. She knew this was bigger than her family. It was bigger than the filmmakers, the cast. It was bigger than all of us. It's a larger message that we all believe God handpicked Zach to tell. And through Zach and through all of the people, I'm one of hundreds of people that came to be of service to this story and found ways to tell it. Right. So, you know, I learned that it was never about me, which was a really awesome thing when you are a director and in charge of millions of dollars and a bunch of hundreds and sometimes almost a thousand people over the course of the experience, because it's not about me. It's about being a channel for the greater good. And trusting that, and trusting like the intuitions and the promptings that come from other places, making sure I'm always talking to Zach, making sure everybody understands that this is not about the job you're doing or my job as the director. This is about honoring and telling this story so that we can touch the hearts of people just like you, Olivia. And then the other thing I learned, oh my God, I learned so much, is that like, it's okay to not be always okay. It's okay to struggle and not know what to do and feel lost. And the family was really, really awesome about showing up in that way for me. Like when they were struggling with something or when I was struggling with something. And it just was like this amazing thing where Zach really modeled for all of us, like what vulnerability looked like, and that we all could come together as a family, as a group, and tell this story in a very un-Hollywood way. So yeah, I think those were two things that come to mind.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. There's a lot to learn from the movie. It's very touching, and I think those are great things. And what are you most excited for when this comes out? What are you looking forward to?
I am most excited. I just want people to share it. You know, I had to make the hard choice to not release it in movie theaters. You know, every young filmmaker wants to have his movie on the big screen and 3,000 screens around the country and, you know, make hundreds of millions of dollars. And maybe this movie could have been that in another world or life, but I don't think it was ever destined to be. That's why we partnered with Disney, and that's why it's a Disney movie. I believe that Zach wanted this story and his story to be given to people where they are now. They're not in the theaters. It's not safe to be in the theaters. Everyone's at home. They're looking at their phones. They're looking at Instagram and Twitter and TikTok. They're watching the news. They're looking at the presidential election. They're scared. They're worried. They're nervous. Hundreds of thousands of people have died because of a illness. It's a hard and scary time to be alive right now. And I think that this particular movie and this story and this message and Zach's message couldn't be more ripe and perfect to meet people where they are today. So what I'm excited about is hopefully hearing how people share this movie and their experience watching the movie. But more than anything, I'm excited to see what people do the next day when they wake up. Because I hope that Zach and his story stays with them and gives them a little bit of ease and comfort as we navigate a very intense, painful time in world history.
Right. Well, that's about it for my questions. I mean, it's obviously such a wonderful movie, and there's, like you've been saying, so much to learn, especially not only just young people, a young audience, but just for everybody. I'm really also looking forward to seeing how people react to it and the lessons that people internalize. And I think I'm excited to see how it goes. Congratulations,
Me too.
Justin.
Thank you. And let's try to get Clouds to #1 again. How cool would that be?
Yeah, let's do it. That'd be awesome.
Olivia, you are a fantastic interviewer. I hope that you get to keep doing this. You have a bright future. I can't believe you're only a senior in high school. So keep going and keep doing this, okay?
Thank you. Thank you so much.